have
to
a different
deport illegal immigrants
view.
after the previous administration allowed
Reclaiming my
21
time.
million
I am
illegals
not
to
here to
cross our
listen
border.
to rhetorical responses. I would like to have a professional response that I would expect.
Senator Mazie Hirono directly challenges Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over his fitness to lead the Department of Defense, accusing him of reckless leadership, politicizing the military, and escalating domestic tensions through the unprecedented deployment of troops inside U.S. cities. The exchange centers on constitutional limits, civilian oversight, and whether Hegseth would obey court orders or resist unlawful commands from the president.
Secretary Hegseth, you've had a tough start. At your confirmation hearing, my Democratic colleagues and I rightly questioned whether you had the requisite qualifications and experience to lead the DoD, the largest federal agency, especially given your checkered past, which included paying $50,000 in hush money to settle a sexual assault allegation against you and driving 2 veterans organizations into the ground. After only months on the job, our concerns about you have proven true, as far as I'm concerned. Instead of strengthening national security, you've turned the Pentagon into a dysfunctional mess. You are jeopardizing military operations and service members' lives with your unprecedented action of texting classified military plans to anyone who might invoke your ego. Leading the Department of Defense is more than just a PR campaign filled with photo ops. While you pose for cameras, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine continues unabated. Israel and Iran are also at war, in large part because your boss tore up a multilateral agreement former President Obama brokered with the UK, France, Germany, China, and Russia that curbed Iran's nuclear program and ambitions. Meanwhile, China advances in the Pacific as this regime undermines and attacks our allies. At a time when steady leadership is critical, we are confronted with crisis and instability. Mr. Secretary, close to 5,000 Marines and National Guards have been deployed to LA without the request or consent of the California governor or the Los Angeles mayor, Bass. Rather than calming the situation, this troop deployment is purposefully inflaming and escalates tensions. You claim lethality is your top priority. Do you plan to unleash this lethal force against U.S. citizens and civilians in LA and other cities?
Well, Senator, I would reject most of the characterization of that statement, including lethality against U.S. cities, when all of those National Guardsmen and Marines have conducted themselves with the utmost of professionalism. Our federal agents, Americans, who deserve to be able to do their job to deport illegal immigrants after the previous administration allowed 21 million illegals to cross our border.
I am not here to listen to rhetorical responses. I would like to have a professional response that I would expect from somebody who is the Secretary of Defense. Millions of people peacefully demonstrated this weekend against the president acting like a king. Given this regime's dangerous policy of mobilizing troops inside the U.S., the politicizing of the military is a legitimate concern. So, given the dangerous policy of mobilizing troops inside the U.S., if ordered by the president, I'm going to ask you once again, to shoot peaceful protesters in the legs, would you carry out such an order from the president?
Senator, as I've said before, of course, I reject the premise of your question and the characterization that I would be given or are given unlawful orders. It's all meant to attempt to smear the commander-in-chief, and I won't fall for it.
Considering that the president in his first term actually ordered such a thing, it is not a premise that you can reject. He can order, do the same thing. So you're, again, I think you would just follow what the president wants you to do. Let's face it, it is not normal to call up our troops in this way, and there is active litigation against this deployment. Will you follow a court's order regarding whether or not this deployment is legal? If the court says this deployment of troops into our cities is not legal. Would you follow that court's order?
It's pending courts, Senator.
Well, when the court decides, would you follow that court's order decision?
I don't believe district courts should be determining national security policy.
So
but
you will not be following that.
when it goes to the
It's a
Supreme Court,
legitimate
we'll see.
Court. And unless the president decides to appeal, there you have it. So I take it that you don't consider district court decisions to be legitimate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hirono's interrogation exposes a critical tension between civilian control of the military and adherence to constitutional checks and balances. From the outset, she interrogates Hegseth's judgment and competence, emphasizing that his past conduct, including the handling of sexual assault allegations and leadership failures in veterans organizations, casts a shadow over his ability to oversee the Pentagon, the largest federal agency. This is not a critique of political affiliation, it is a scrutiny of judgment, credibility, and risk management at the highest level of national defense. The deployment of nearly 5,000 Marines and National Guard troops into Los Angeles, without consultation with the governor or mayor, illustrates the operational and legal risks of politicizing military authority. Hirono highlights that this is not a routine security measure, but a politically charged act that could escalate tensions rather than contain them. Hegseth's responses focus on generalized assurances of professionalism and obedience to orders, but they sidestep the question of legality and the ethical boundaries of deploying armed forces against U.S. citizens. The critical concern is whether the Secretary prioritizes lawful oversight and constitutional fidelity, or loyalty to the President above all else. The exchange becomes especially urgent when Hirono frames the hypothetical of using lethal force against peaceful protesters. While extreme, the question serves as a litmus test for Hegseth's understanding of lawful command authority. His refusal to acknowledge that an unlawful order exists or could be rejected is alarming. Senior defense leaders are not merely operational managers. They are constitutional safeguards. By declining to recognize the possibility of illegal commands, Hegseth signals a willingness to blur the line between lawful military action and executive overreach, potentially placing service members in direct conflict with constitutional principles. Judicial authority is another critical point of contention. When Hirono asks whether Hegseth would comply with a court order declaring the troop deployment illegal, he dismisses the legitimacy of district courts in determining national security policy. This position undermines the rule of law and civil military norms. Courts exist to provide oversight, and refusing to accept their authority jeopardizes the balance between executive action, legislative oversight, and judicial review. It also raises the prospect of military compliance with political objectives at the expense of constitutional obligations, a dangerous precedent in a nation founded on civilian supremacy over armed forces. Hirono's critique extends beyond legality to strategic prudence. The politicization of military deployments risks eroding public trust in the armed forces and militarizing civil disputes. Soldiers may be forced to navigate contradictory directives, obeying orders that may be unlawful or politically motivated while maintaining professionalism and public trust. Hegseth's emphasis on loyalty to the president, combined with evasive answers on adherence to judicial rulings, reflects a leadership approach that prioritizes executive preference over institutional integrity. Such a philosophy could compromise not only domestic stability, but also broader national security, as trust in command structures is fundamental to operational effectiveness. The questioning also implicitly addresses the broader implications of civil-military relations. Hirono points to peaceful demonstrations as evidence that deploying troops in U.S. cities is disproportionate and potentially counterproductive. Hegseth's answers do not confront the strategic consequences of these actions. Instead, he resorts to rhetorical defenses of professionalism and generalized law enforcement objectives, leaving unresolved whether the Secretary recognizes the long-term risks of normalizing military intervention in civilian affairs. By challenging Hegseth on both constitutional and operational grounds, Hirono illuminates a systemic issue: the potential for a senior defense official to interpret loyalty to the president as paramount, superseding legal, ethical, and institutional constraints. In a period of heightened global and domestic instability, such a mindset raises questions about readiness, judgment, and adherence to the principles that underpin U.S. military authority. The hearing underscores that civilian control of the military is not merely symbolic. It requires leaders who understand that their duty to the Constitution can never be subordinated to political expediency. Hegseth's inability or unwillingness to unequivocally affirm compliance with legal and constitutional standards signals a risk that cannot be ignored: as the consequences extend from domestic civil liberties to international credibility and national security.